from the Indiana University Lilly School of Philanthropy. Dr. Qu is an excellent addition to our program. She's been a key part of our growing of our nonprofit management area. And her research interests are in management and philanthropy, and her primary interest is in nonprofit finance and economics, the areas that have practical implications for capacity building and resource development of nonprofit organizations. Research projects include nonprofit revenue management, organizational capacity, financial reporting and accountability, social innovation, impact investing, motivations for individual giving, and nonprofit resource development. Dr. Qu, of course, she's published in a number of different places. One of the premier outlets for us is a place called Nonprofit and Voluntary Sector Quarterly, presented at a number of national conferences. She presents at Arnova and in the ISTAR conference, which is the International Society for Third Sector Research. She received a Science of Philanthropy and a PhD award from the University of Chicago. She's also received a number of awards from the Association for Research, Arnova, again, Emerging Scholars, Diversity Scholars, and Doctoral Fellowships. So we're very pleased. Dr. Qu, we're fortunate to be able to have you here with us. I appreciate you spending a little bit of your afternoon with us and sharing some of your thoughts on this important question for people I know has been a pressing issue. So we really were thrilled and pleasure to be able to have you. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you take it away.
Well, thanks, Dr. Brown. Thanks, everybody, for having me here today. And I prepared some slides, even though I would like to know each one of you. And but I probably will turn my screen to the slides right now and get it started. In the middle of my presentation, I will ask Dr. Brown to help me to break into several groups, and we're going to talk about a question related to your current nonprofit finance situation. And at the end of this our conversation, we're going to have a Q&A session in case you have some thoughts to share, or you have some questions for me or for all the audience. All right, so I'm going to share my screen now. All right, can you see my screen?
Perfect, looks good.
Great. So today I'm going to talk about building financial resilience through a crisis. Initially, I was thinking about, well, let's talk about how are we going to get together and try to fix our current challenges. But it is not, the crisis does not just happen one time. This crisis will help us to prepare for the next, or the previous crisis will help us, could already have prepared us for this one. So I'm talking about how to bounce back from the challenges, how to deal with the short-term problems leading to the long-term resilience. Here's the overview today. We will start about talking about the current financial challenges facing all the nonprofits. Then we move on to talk about how are we going to evaluate our current cash position? What are the tools to help us to manage our cash flow? If you have short-term cash shortage, how are you going to manage that? And how to move on from short-term challenges to long-term sustainability. All right, let's get started. Before I start talking about our content today, here are some resources I think it might be very helpful to practitioners who are very interested in helping with your financial management and finance. Here are 3 sources. The slides eventually will be posted on our website, so you can go download the slides and access to these resources directly through the links listed here. Nonprofit Finance Fund, Prepare Nonprofits, they all have some resources that's related to the COVID-19 situations. And Wallace Foundation, they have the planning sources for nonprofit financial management. There are some important tools and useful tools for you to use, and some of them are today we're not going to be able to get to it. For example, the scenario financial planning. We're going to talk a little bit about cash flow management, show you a spreadsheet, but a lot of the tools that will take a a semester's financial class to get through it. But here are some useful resources for you. And also, here are a few articles related to finance, nonprofit finance, that I think that are useful. If you haven't read them, these are, I think, they're good reads. They're short and they're insightful. All right. First of all, we are living in a crisis, and it has caused the nonprofit organizations some substantial financial challenges, and some of them talk that this is nothing like before. So many of you probably have already experienced a significant disruptions to your various kind of revenue streams. The damage is quite comprehensive from, for example, many of you probably have experienced the canceled fundraising events, your annual fundraisers now because of the restrictions on face-to-face interactions, and that's kind of disrupted. Or if you are relying on revenue generating events to generate earned income, and that could also be potentially damaged. For example, the members cannot meet. For museums, you're probably having suspended some of the missions. If you are relying on government for service reimbursement, you probably have experienced some delayed fees in the past several months. And the last one is for donations. Generally, when the economy is down, we are overall experience reduced individual donations. And what makes it even worse is that there's probably some unexpected operational costs that were originally not accounted for in your annual budget in the beginning of this fiscal year. So now, for example, we are transitioning our workers to do remote work, to work from home. Some of the organizations have to come up with additional costs for the technology support to help our workers to work from home. For those providing on-site services, you're probably experiencing additional costs to buy protective gears for your on-site employees, or additional measures to help to prepare to protect the safety of both your clients and your employees on-site. And because of the pandemic, you may probably considering hiring additional replacement workers just in case that your former employee, official employee got sick, or you are anticipating fewer volunteers. And for some organizations, you are facing increasing demand for services for especially for social service organizations. So less revenue, additional cost, facing increased demand. These are a combination of a very serious financial challenges for facing our nonprofit organizations right now. So how do we get started? The first step is, let's ask this question. What's your cash position right now? Put it this way is, how long can your organization last if our revenue sources continue to be disrupted? If you have, considering you have no additional income in the next few months, do you have financial reserves, operating reserves to help you through it? Or are your organization is in a very good liquidity position to help you through this? Or to put it another way is that, how long you as leadership, as member and management of your organization, how many months do you have before you can stabilize your organization, right? So here are several liquidity ratios that we can use to help to do an initial financial assessment of your organizations, right? The first one is the current ratio, which is the ratio of current assets divided by current liabilities. This ratio tells you what's your organization's ability to pay off your current debt. Current debt, I mean, basically it's those debt you have to pay within a year using your current assets, which is current assets are, we are talking about unrestricted cash or cash equivalents or accounts receivable. So if this ratio if you're under 1, you are in a not very good liquidity position. The greater the ratio, the better your liquidity position. Liquidity is quite important when we are just talking about nonprofit organizations' daily management. But now in a financial crisis, and when we are expecting lower revenue and higher costs, liquidity is becoming an even more important topic to think about. So this is the current ratio. Another way to evaluate this is the quick ratio. Quick ratio is to think about if you can use your most liquid assets, that is excluding your inventory and prepaid expenses from your current assets. Use this most liquid assets. What's your organization's ability to meet your short-term obligations, liabilities? Again, your organization's quick ratio should not be less than 1, right? So this provides you some basic assessment of your liquidity position. Alternatively, right now, this might be good. This might be a good ratio for nonprofit leadership to think about, is that instead of divided by your current liabilities, let's think about your monthly expenses. So this ratio tells you how many months of savings your organization have if it operates at its current rate and receives no additional income. This tells you how many months you have before you can get your revenue stable, your cost structure stable, right? The last question about your liquidity position is that, do you all have rainy day funds? We have been recommending nonprofit organizations to build operating reserves. If so, if you do have reserves, you are in a better position right now, but how long your reserve will last you at your current rate of expense. According to the Nonprofit Finance Fund, they do an annual state of the nonprofit sector survey. Currently, most of the organizations, less than a quarter of the organizations reporting that survey had more than 6 months of cash reserves. When we think about 6 months of cash reserves as a golden rule, only a quarter of the nonprofits actually prepared 6 months of cash reserve. The majority had less than 3. 3 months to 6 months. 3 months is the lower limit for your cash reserve, but the majority had less than 3 months. About 10%, which is more serious, that had less than 30 days of cash on hand. So if you had less than 30 days of cash on hand right now, when we are facing the serious challenges we've been talking about, you are probably going to face cash shortage in the short term, in a month, if you don't have any cash reserve. So this is evaluating your organization's liquidity position. How to do cash flow projection? Does your organization do cash flow projection? Cash flow projection tells you if and when your organization will face cash shortage. It requires you to map expected revenue and expenses at the beginning of each month. And you need to separate your unrestricted from temporary restricted funds. So I'm going to show you an example of how to do cash flow projection. Okay, so here is a template. There are different templates from different sources. This one is from Nonprofit Finance Fund. As you can see here.
I don't think we can see the template, Ellie.
You can't? Okay.
No. Shoot.
Okay, let me.
Yeah, do it. You'll find it.
You just
find
have
it?
to go to a different screen.
Right,
Oh,
did you see
stop
it?
this one and then launch the second one, or what?
Yeah, so stop sharing and then
Okay.
select the screen that your template's on.
Okay, all right. Let's see this spreadsheet. All right. Can you see now?
There it is.
Okay. So in finance course, we talk about this as a management tool, and which is helps you to monitor your cash flow and project your cash flow to see if you're going to have a cash shortage. So to come up with the steps next, right? So cash flow projection, we usually do it by month. And in times of crisis, you might want to do it more frequently, but usually we do it by month. So as you can see here, this column, you have 12 months of cash flow. You do the cash flow projection, and you also record the actual cash flow. And in this column, basically, you put several categories of your operating cash, and your non-operating cash, or restricted, temporarily restricted funds. For operating cash, this is your inflow, your cash inflow from earned income, from your unrestricted contributions. We don't count for restricted contributions here because we're talking about cash flow. Restricted, unless your restricted cash is expected to release in a month that you account for. And this add up together, you will get your total operating cash receipt. And for the outflow side, and we can see you can put all your operating expenses here, and you get all your total operating expenses, and you get net operating cash flow. And going to next, if you have non-operating cash, which means if you have line of credits, you have debt, what are the inflow from those sources and what are the outflow from these sources, and you get net non-operating cash. And also for temporarily restricted cash, what is going to be released in each month, and you get your ending cash. This way, do it by monthly, you know what is your cash flow. Instead of, if we do it yearly, but we only do a yearly budget, we wouldn't be able to accurately account for each month cash inflow and outflow. The reason for this is that, again, it helps you to closely manage your cash position, helps you to anticipate if you're going to experience any type of cash shortage. Okay, let's go back to the slides. So just now we talked about how to evaluate your liquidity position using several ratios. We talk about cash, if you have operating reserves. We talk about how to manage and project your cash flow. So the next question is, after you do all this evaluation and self-assessment, if you find out you're expecting a cash shortage, what would you do? What are the options you have? I would like you to, Dr. Brown, could you break out our audience into several groups, and we can spend about 8 minutes to discuss this question?
I'm going to let Nicole do that. So our question is, how do you think about what do you do to address this cash flow issue? And come back with some ideas. Is that what you wanted to be able to do?
Yeah, if you are if you're expecting a cash shortage, meaning that you do not have enough cash to cover your expenses, what are the possible options for organizations to consider?
Perfect. I'd say go on ahead, and when you get into your groups, folks, introduce yourself, and then if any ideas you have about how to be able to address that question, and maybe if somebody in the group can think about being a reporter, that would be great as well, to be able to report back. But any of you can participate and report back. But somebody should be thinking about bringing back some of that information to the group. Nicole, go on ahead.
All right. See y'all soon. Heather, if you're there and can hear me, let me know if you're having trouble getting into the breakout room. Welcome back. Everyone was given 60 seconds, so they'll start trickling in.
Well, that was fun, Ellie. We did good in our little group.
Great. So who would like to report? What your group come up with?
Feel free to chime right in or type stuff into the chat box. Either way.
This is Go ahead, Denise.
This is Denise Parker. I was with Ron Kozer and Pam from Habitat in our group, and we brought out several really good ideas. One of them is making communication with your board, letting them know the situation, asking them for their advice, asking them to help go to some of the larger donors and ask for support to carry you forward. Also is one of the first thing is look at your expenses and see how you can cut some of your expenses. The biggest expense you probably have is personnel costs, and those personnel costs, you don't want to lay people off, but maybe you can modify their work schedule, reduce everyone's time, maybe 5 to 10 hours a week, to where you can still keep them on board. You still are not releasing them as unemployed citizens. And if you're on an organization that has a headquarters base, you can reach out to your headquarters, just like to your board, asking them for advice and how you proceed, and not to be afraid to tell your story, to let them know the cash shortage.
That's great. Who else want to share?
I think it's also a time that sometimes there were two of us in the meeting from very different backgrounds, one new leadership and then myself running a theater that's been around for 25 years. And we had to cut our budget already $1 million from what it was. But one of the things that we looked at is that sometimes nonprofits forget the banking relationship they've had. So we went to Frost Bank, which we've dealt with for a number of years. And so they gave us a $600,000 unsecured line of credit based on the fact that it's not a grant, they'll be watching it, they'll be monitoring the line of credit, but it'll help us get through during this period of time. Specifically, we showed them that, we had a plan that we might run into a $200,000 shortfall as we were trying to pivot through, even after we made some changes. So rather than asking them to come up with a grant, this unsecured line of credit, as they knew we'd go to funders and everything, seemed to work very well. So I think we always have to think about the fact that the money that we're putting in the banks and the relationships we've built over years, now's the time to go to those organizations and not only depend on the PPP and things of that nature.
Okay, so that's a great idea, financing, if you have an ongoing long-term relationship with a local bank. What else? Anything that's not mentioned here?
I can add in a few things. Our group discussed, one of the first things we discussed was sending out a letter to funders already and starting off with a story from a beneficiary, because they believe that they should be front and center and really lead the communication, but then also asking for money and being pretty clear about that. And because if you don't ask for the money specifically, then it won't come. And a few other ideas was renting out existing office space and seeking grants and a few other things. But also that it was difficult because you can't overload the people that work with you, and you can't necessarily take a deep dive into every situation that occurs every 6 weeks, for example.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you mentioned reach out to donors to do another round of fundraising from your existing donors, and think about how to better utilize your current capital assets to see if you can turn them into cash for current needs.
Yes.
Well, we discussed, we have two small organizations that were in our group. One is basically sitting at a standstill because of COVID, and so there's not a whole lot of outlay, but there's not a lot of income either, if I'm correct. And then we have one that's a home-based small nonprofit that has some creative ways of creating a camp with social distancing and making that a fun event. We lose our event on October 9th. So we are doing an online mask parade, and we're challenging everyone to something very creative and have a bidding process, and even forcing someone to wear a mask and somebody can pay for it. You know, we've got a lot of ways we're working with that. And we're also having the board's putting together an online auction through an auction company for additional funding. And then of course we have our grants, and we're always looking for new ones.
Wonderful. So seeking grants, but also try to adapt your current or start new current in-person campaigns, or start your new innovative fundraising campaigns for this time, because now you can't meet in person in a large scale. So those are very innovative fundraising ideas. Thank you for sharing. Right. Anything else before I reveal the answers?
Hey,
right.
just real quick, Dr. Chu, there
Yes.
were a couple of themes in ours. One simply broke down to looking where expenses could be cut, and some of that had to do with travel and events. And the other had to do with innovation in terms of how they were engaging donors, whether it be hosting town halls so that donors and other stakeholders could get a sense of the state of the organization. And then the other was really testing out social media strategies and becoming more fluent in that environment if one was responsible for that.
Mm-hmm. Great. So Dr. Taylor just mentioned something that reminds me, we are, even though we are facing some kind of reduced revenue, but also we need to evaluate associated cost. So it might mean doing something online, it also mean reduced expenses for you. So then we need to do all the cost accounting again for a new program that you're implementing. Okay. All right. So let's continue. I prepared some ideas, and many of the ideas you have already touched, but let me summarize for you. Let's see. Okay. So if you're, for example, if you're expecting $10,000 shortage next month, what are you gonna do? I tend to break the situation, the cash shortage situation into short-term, mid-term, and long-term. For long-term, we're talking more into building your financial resilience and sustainability. So in the short term, let's think about these options. There's several options down here. If you have operating reserves, now is the time to draw funds from your operating reserves. Can you accelerate a collection of receivables, if you have any? Many of you mentioned that work with funders. So work with funders, not just asking your current donors for more money. Everybody has a capacity, but some people may have a bigger heart to give during time of crisis to support the organizations that they have been a cheerleader for. But work with your funders, you can also ask for example, can they relax some of the requirements associated with grants? Can they speed up some of the payments to you? For example, if it is already in process, they're gonna give some funding in 6 months, in a year. Can they give you now to help you through this crisis? And for some restricted funds, can they agree to convert some of them into unrestricted funds for you to help you through the cash crisis? So this is working with your funders. For your vendors, if you have payments, can you work with them to delay payments? But this is also a kind of relationship building. Here we're asking to accelerate collection of receivables. Here we're thinking about to delay payments. So the vendors may also experience some challenges. So this is also not just called financial transaction, but also to work with them to see if you can delay the payments. And for your lenders, can you work with them to provide a temporary loan relief, right? And many of you mentioned about cutting down expenses or cutting down some of the payroll. There's a big impact on if you are cutting down you're laying off the employees. So the first thing I would think about is sit down with your board and management to talk about what are the non-mission essential expenses. And that's the first we need to think about when we want to cut. And going forward to the mission essential expenses, that's a more a delicate discussion. I would not recommend you to think about the mission essential expenses to cut down in the first place. So for the short term, let's talk about first think about the non-mission essential expenses. But what is non-mission essential? That's up to every organization to decide. And that's not a decision the executive should make on his own. It's something as an organization, you need to talk with your board, your management team, and your staff. The last one for the short-term management, cash shortage is the financing options. I put a star here because it's a double-edged sword. There are some loan options. There are some COVID-specific loans right now where through CARES Act, the PPT, the EIDL, but they're not specific to nonprofit organizations. So community-based organization, nonprofit organization may be left out through these loans. But if you have the capacity, you should try it and apply it early. Moving down is more generally, we have somebody just mentioned that lines of credit. If you have a good relationship with your local banks, you could work with them to provide line of credit and working capital loans to help you with to pay for your payroll, for your temporary cash shortage. The last one is some low interest loans. There may be some options from foundations who are willing to help local community organizations, or CDFIs, this community development financial institutions. They sometimes offer low interest loan. For organizations for capital projects, we usually recommend them to go through the CDFIs first and compare CDFI with commercial banks, because commercial banks, the loan interest is usually higher than CDFIs. A final caution, a cautionary tale is that these are loans. It helps you through the short-term crisis, but you need to think about, do you have the capacity to repay? What's the cost adding to your operating expense side? And if you're taking out 2 loans to help you with this crisis, will it hurt your long-term financial position? So before you're taking out loans, we should at least think about the other options. And when you take out loans, think about your capacity to repay back the loan. Okay, so that's the short-term options. In the midterm, many of you have already talked about. One is convert your in-person fundraising events to online campaigns. Because right now a lot of organizations are talking about canceled in face-to-face fundraising events. So what are the creative ways to start an online campaign? So that's one thing to think about. Apply for more grants, COVID-related funds from governments, from foundations. So aggressively apply for grants if you have the capacity. The third option is if you're facing increased costs, operational costs because of the remote work, maybe look for corporations to donate in-kind donations to your recipients. For example, if you run if your recipients do not have the access to digital technology products, can you look for corporations to make such kind of donations instead of you trying to figure out using your cash to do this? The next one is probably more of the mid to long-term thing is if your face-to-face traditional program right now is suspended, is there a way to convert it to deliver part of the program online? And that would help with your earned income revenue. And the last everybody mentioned is that we reach out to our committee of support, the board members, the community supporters, your major donors, and your institutional funders. Many of them are willing to help you. Some of them may already reach out to you, but it's always a good idea to reach out to them. Sometimes it's not just about asking for money directly, or maybe just asking for their ideas, asking for their inputs, asking for their relationship building. They may have more ideas that your organization alone can't come up with. So I put this set of options as midterm because if you're facing a shortage right away, you're trying to get grants, you're trying to do more fundraising, this will not help you right away. But in the midterm, we are now probably at the midterm into this pandemic crisis. And this is now we need to think about besides immediate cash shortage. Okay. The other way we could approach to this current crisis, ongoing crisis, is that what would your organization think about this question? What would you do differently to be more prepared if you can go back 1 or 2 years? And this is switching our short-term survival mindset to long-term sustainability side. I find out this is a good article from Stanford Social Innovation Review. It's a short article, but it's quite, I like how they approached this crisis is that they started talking about during the 2008 recession, what kind of challenge they faced and what did they do after, and what they are doing right now based on what they have learned in the past crisis. So what we're doing right now in the current crisis is helping us to prepare for the next one. So we are not just thinking about getting through the current crisis, we're thinking about how to build our financial sustainability in the long term. This organization, I summarized some points, but you can go to this article to read it. It's a short one, but it's quite informational. They have figured out some steps to do it. First of all, they prioritize their stability. So if they were thinking about growth in some of the programs, and then now they stop the growth programs. They also work to ensure their current employees' well-being to stay more connected. They aggressively track and apply for dozens of national and local funds created to support nonprofits through this crisis. They work with the funders for more flexibility, to speed up delivery from payments, and to make personal phone calls to share stories of hope and challenges. So to reach out to your donors. And then the next one, they do new fundraising, launching aggressive digital fundraising campaigns. And they also look for tech companies to donate digital devices for their youth. And the last thing they mentioned, and I want to emphasize, is that their preparation begins before the crisis. They raise enough capital that can last each chapter a couple of years, and they diversify their funding stream. They require their local chapters to not rely on a single revenue for over 30%. And they ensure community support before they start a new program, a new chapter. So all this preparation begins before this crisis, and the preparation helps you to go through the next crisis. So this is where we talk about from short-term survival to long-term sustainability. We talk about this short-term survival. We just discussed these options, but I want to emphasize from now on, what we need to think about is that these options, long-term sustainability steps that we need to take. First of all, build adequate rainy day funds, either through your quasi-endowment, your operating reserves, and it's better to have at least 6 months of operating reserves. And you should have a liquidity target, and you should monitor and maintain that target. And we just showed some liquidity ratios for you to constantly, regularly evaluate your organization's liquidity target. You should develop a cash budget besides your annual budget to project and monitor your cash flows regularly and probably monthly during this time. You should diversify your revenue sources. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. You should diversify your fundraising from now on, and we can see the impact of this pandemic on that restrict our in-person fundraising capacity. How can we use the social media, the online platforms to do more fundraising campaigns online from now on? And you should strengthen your community support, which many of you have already mentioned. And the last thing is that build a business model that makes sense. Now is probably the time to evaluate your business model if you are already thinking about how to cut your expenses. So this is the last thing I want to talk about today. Is this is from a Spectrum Nonprofit Services, a useful chart tool for you to assess your business model. There are 4 quadrants. The first one, this is where your heart is. It creates high mission impact, but brings in low profit. So if you're in this position, or any of your program is in this position, you need to think about, can we lower the cost, change the cost structure? Can we increase change the revenue structure so to increase the low profitability? But baseline is that this is where your heart is, and this is your start position. Sorry, this is your start position. This is where a program that creates high mission impact and also high probability. If you have a program here, you might want to think about, is there a way to scale up? If you have the capacity to scale up. And here is your money tree. You make low mission impact here. However, it can subsidize your other programs by bringing high profit. if you have a program that's in this position, the two directions to think about. One is, can you increase the profits of this one? The other is, are there ways to achieve bigger impact, so to move to this one? Or the bottom line is that we need to be cautionary about, is this aligned with our brand? And we talk about cutting expenses. If you have a program that's here, this is where you think about putting a stop sign or cut this program. Before that, talk with your board and management and think about, if we have something here, can we move this program to scale up a mission a little, or can we move this program to scale up the probability a little? If there's no way to do it, and that's probably where we put a stop sign. So these are, in terms of not just about currently, when you're thinking about your business model, cutting expenses, this is also for your long-term organizational business development. This is how we think about our programs, our organization, not just about making both social impact and financial impact. There's a double bottom line to consider here. All right, so that's the end of my presentation.
Power finish there, Ellie.
Okay. All right, great.
You gave a lot of good stuff there at the questions, folks. Thoughts, reactions. I posted the matrix map in the discussion threads, because that is a nice resource, the one that Ellie had cited there on that slide.
Damien, we see your question in the post. Why don't you go ahead and ask it personally?
Thank you. So you mentioned that organization, one of their strategies was to make sure that, if I remember correctly, to make sure that every funding source was 30% or less of their total funding. Is that a good benchmark to aim for, or are there other ways to think of that? Are there other benchmarks depending on the situation?
So that benchmark is just one organization's case. That's what they, Friends of Youth, that organization, they require their local chapters to have that benchmark. But I do not necessarily think 30% is the absolute benchmark. The general way to think about this is that if you only have one revenue source, for example, if you rely on earned income through admission fees, your organization probably is in a deep financial trouble right now. However, if you have other sources of revenue, you might have a little bit leeway there. In the worst case scenario, we think about this. We think about the damage to each revenue sources may not be the same. You have one revenue that got hit the most, but other revenue sources are less hit. So also, when you think about diversifying revenue stream, you need to think about, does that make sense for your organization's mission? You won't just go out and find an earned income that does not match your mission, but try to scale that part out, and that's hurt your organization's social impact.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
May I make a comment about that?
Yeah, great.
Okay, I'm a president of Friends of Chamber Music. We are an arts/music organization. We've been giving free concerts here in Bryan College Station for 25 years, and we are bound by the IRS. Recent rules, I guess within the last 5 or 6 years, that we would no longer be considered nonprofit if we received more than 33 1/3% of our income from one source. We were founded by the Plus people, anyway, and they were very wealthy faculty members at A&M 25 years ago, and they said, hey, we'll pay you forever and ever. Well, no, the IRS says, no, you can't do that. So we have to have our income come from donors as well as the foundation support from the PLOS Foundation.
Mhm.
And we were going to get, and we've always, once we found out the IRS rulings, we've always been okay. We've never gone over that amount, but we're too close for comfort. And the complexity of the organization is growing, the expenses are growing, and we're going to have to move to paid staff whenever we can as soon as possible, but we're also going to have to move to ticket sales. So that's what the 33 or the 30%, how that affects us.
Mhm. All right. So just to make a comment for that, I really like your sharing your experience. Different types of organizations, their revenue structure is different. Arts organizations are probably have the most diversified revenue structure compared to other types of organizations. Arts organizations can rely on can pretty fairly spread it between private donations, the government funding sometimes, and the fees, admission fees and sales from gift shops or restaurants, events. But this may not be feasible for other types of organizations. So again, it goes back to what's your mission and what type of organizations you are and what opportunities, what are the operating environment you are in.
I want to recognize that we're starting to run out of time. Ellie, I really appreciate you spending an hour with us this afternoon. Very useful, a lot of good stuff. As we mentioned, the material will be available online. We've recorded this, so that'll be available there as well if you want to share it with someone and download some stuff. We'll get to nothing planned immediately. We've got we're planning to, or I guess our next section will be a couple of weeks out. We'll wait for an announcement. I'm hoping to pull together some of our speakers. So Ellie sort of wraps up our summer series here a little bit, and we'll have one in a couple of weeks to be able to, a little bit of reflections, but also some planning for what we're going to do in the fall. But we thought this was pretty successful, and we'd love to be able to continue some programming through the fall, since it looks like we're going to be trapped inside for a little while longer. But thank you, everybody. Appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.